So today's Torah portion is Matos and Masei, and I'm going to focus more on the Masei, which relates the 42 stops of the Jewish people as they traveled from Egypt to the Holy Land of Israel. So to catch everybody up, we left Egypt and we've been traveling through the desert. We've had trials and tribulations. We've had complainers. We've had tragedies, and we received the Torah at Sinai. And now the Jews are camped outside by the Jordanian River. And in the next few weeks, they're going to capture Israel and enter through Jericho. So this is where we're at. So in this Torah portion, Masei, which means journeys, Moshe in the Torah recounts the 42 stops. It's like a diary of your travels. When people travel the world, they keep a diary. So, I always like little jokes. So Arnold is 105 years old. And the rabbi notices that he stopped coming to shul. And he's a guy that came to shul 3 times a day. So the rabbi calls Arnold and he says, Arnold, what happened? How come you stopped coming to shul? He says, Rabbi, I'll tell you the truth. Good morning, Margaret.
Good morning.
When I turned 90, I was sure God was going to take me from this world and I would die. Then I turned 95 and I was sure by 95 God would take me and I would die. Here I am already 105. So what did I figure? That I better stop coming to shul so that God doesn't see me and point me out. And you'll see why I'm sharing this joke in this Torah portion in a few minutes. So 42 travels that Moshe documents the journeys of the Jewish people. But let's see how the passage opens up because it's very weird. This is what Moshe says. Let me read it to you. The Moshe says like this. Moses recorded their stops along the way at God's command. These were their stops along the way. So what does Moshe say in the pasuk? Here I am recording the departures and journeys. I am recording the journeys and the departures of the Jewish people. So the commentaries jump in and say, why is Moshe repetitive? Didn't he just say he's recording the journeys and the departures? Why say, and now I'm recording the journeys and the departures? So this, you might say, well, emphasis. We repeat things for emphasis. Go clean up your room. Didn't I tell you to clean up your room? So we repetitive for emphasis. But then ask the commentaries, if he's emphasizing what he's saying, why doesn't he say, here are the recordings of the departures and journeys? These are the recordings of the departures and journeys. Why is he transposing the words? Departures, journeys, journeys, departures. So we know that in the Torah, nothing is simple. If something is not in the right order, just by that alone, we can glean hundreds of insights and lessons. So I'm going to share with you an insight. And I always tell you that I love to share insights that resonate with me. So this is one of the interesting insights that I read about from the commentaries, based on, of course, Jewish mysticism. So there are 2 types of travelers. There are people that go on a journey and they depart. Good morning, Diane. They depart everything that they left behind, they leave behind. Everything in their lives, they leave behind. They go on a journey and you don't know any remnant of their past. They leave everything behind. I am on a journey to the new world or to a new philosophy, a new psychology, new politics, and I want nothing more of my departure. I don't want to know anything about my past. And in life, because the Torah is eternal, it's not just talking about the 42 journeys of the Jewish people, it's talking about each and every one of our journeys and our departures. We are born in the world and we begin our journey of life, our promised land, metaphorically, spiritually, We journey in life. We have many stops in our lives. We have many challenges in our lives. So there's those people that have journeyed forth, and you look at Jewish history, you have the enlightened Jews called the Maskilim, where they said, we don't need the Torah from Sinai. It's not applicable anymore. It's old-fashioned. It might have been good for the Jews at the Sinai desert, or the Jews who all lived together by the temple in Israel, but now we are enlightened. We are New Age thinkers. We are Germans. We are Hungarians. We are Russians. We are communists. We're socialists. We're not necessarily Jews. Like you'll ask someone, who are you? I'm an American citizen. Oh, but also, I happen to be Jewish. Or you can ask someone, who are you? I'm a Jew. I'm an American citizen. I'm a Jewish American. So people view themselves in different ways. And we see the generations of Jews who left, departed from traditions and Torah. Where are they today? You can't find them. Because the secret, our eternity, is what we are. We are where our roots are. Where we departed from, but not left behind. So those are people that journey away. They want nothing from their past. And then you have the other extreme. You meet Jews and they say to you, what was good for Baba and Zayd is good for me. I don't need any new life. I don't need new ways of education. I don't need technology. I don't need new trends. My Baba and Zayda were like this. My elder Baba and Zayda. My great-great-grandfather was like this. Why do I need to change? If they wrap them on the knuckles with the ruler then, it's good to wrap them on the knuckles with the ruler now. They journey, but they never depart. And that's also not a good approach. I remember a family wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. What did they write? This is a Chabad family. They wrote, Rebbe, our children don't want to stay at the Shabbos table Friday night. The Rebbe says, when do they come together? Havdalah. At the end of Shabbos, when we're saying goodbye to Shabbos, they all come. But to sit down at the Friday night Shabbos table, they're nowhere to be found. They hear Kiddush and they run. So the Rebbe said to the couple, the father and mother, what do you do? What do you mean what we do? We do the same thing every Friday night. Says the Rebbe, that's the problem. The same gefilte fish with the little pile of horseradish. The same chicken soup with one knedel. The same roasted chicken with a piece of potato kugel. The mother said, every week I do the same. What's the change? Do you have guests? No, my husband's too tired. Why do young children want to be at a Shabbos table? Because it's exciting, it's interesting, the menu. You have to create excitement. You can't do the same like Bob and Zayd in the shtetl. You need stimulation for children today. I know every Friday my kids want to know the menu. If I do the same thing twice in a row. That's all you made? That's all you're making, Ma? So 5 o'clock, I run back and I make more because they complain to me. That's all I made. But the Rebbe was telling the family, you need to create excitement, bring guests, bring interesting conversation. Make your Shabbos table like Havdalah. Why do they run for Havdalah? Means Havdalah is the service at the end of the Shabbos, because they know Shabbos is over. But if you create excitement at your Shabbos table, interest, you can trust me, your kids will want to be there. I had Shabbos guests before Corona, and my kids usually, they're young adults, they drift away by dessert. They sat and sat. Why? This husband and wife were fascinating. They had such interesting conversation about what they do. I'll tell you another time, my kids didn't want to leave, and I complimented them later. I said, by dessert, my kids are gone. They're here. It's a compliment to you because look how interesting you were. They had us riveted with their stories, and the husband is a sports psychologist. It was very fascinating. So you have to journey. Don't leave behind your roots, your foundation. But on the other hand, don't journey and stay where you are. You have to have a combination of both. Journey forth, adapt new ideas, interests, but remember the Torah, the traditions, stay with us wherever we go. That is our secret to eternity. And that's our secret to actually coming to our individual promised land and collective promised land with the coming of Mashiach. So this is a beautiful insight I wanted to share. I think it's a very interesting insight. And there's another interesting story that, does anybody have any comments, or I feel like I'm going too fast. Does anybody want to add anything or say anything about your journey? So let's journey forth to the next.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
You said there were some Jews that said that they're just forgetting about everything and leaving their whole life and their past behind, right? Who are those Jews?
You see all the time. You speak to Jews and you say to them, you get into a discussion and they go, yes, my parents, grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and they gave it all up because, and we're not judging, but we're saying our approach has to be to journey forth, but remember our roots and our heritage and our Torah because that's our success. That's our secret to perpetuity. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Hi.
So there's another beautiful story in the Torah portion, and after this beautiful story, I want to go into what the main topic of the discussion will be today, and I hope you'll jump in. That I said they're on the outside of the Jordanian River. In the next few months, we know that Moshe, in the next two Torah portion, we know Moshe is going to pass on, and the Jews are going to enter the land of Israel through Jericho with Joshua, the new leader of the Jewish people. So they're camped by the Jordanian River, and two of the tribe leaders, Gad and Reuven, Reuven is the oldest son of Jacob, the oldest tribe, come to Moshe. And they say to Moshe, we have a huge amount of herds in our families. And over here is tremendous natural resources. We would like to take this piece of land as our inheritance. We want to settle here. So Moshe is very upset. And he rebukes them. He says, you mean you're going to allow your brothers and sisters to go fight the inhabitants of Israel and you're going to stay behind? And secondly, you're going to do what the Meraglim did, the spies did. Remember, the spies said, we don't want to go into the land of Israel, right? What did they say? It's too difficult. There are giants there. Let's stay here. You're going to, again, reiterate the fact that you don't want to go into the land of Israel. How does that look? So God and Reuven say to Moshe, you know what, Moshe? You're right. But this is our intentions. Our intention is to go into the land of Israel with all the people, help them capture the land. When everyone is happy and settled in, then we'll go back here. So our intentions was never to desert our people. Our intentions was, eventually we want to come back here. So then Moshe says, okay, if that's your intentions, very good. So the first question we have to ask is, if the mission is for every Jew to go to the land of Israel, that's their promised land, that's what God wants, why does Moshe acquiesce and say, okay, later you can come back? And then also, why doesn't Moshe realize right away that they didn't mean it in a bad way? They meant it in the good light. They didn't why did Moshe rebuke them? And the answer is a beautiful thing, that Gad and Reuven were not really telling Moshe the truth. It was a half-truth. What were they really saying? And because they weren't giving Moshe the true story of what they really meant, Moshe didn't read them properly. They didn't say what they meant, and they didn't mean what they say. This is what they were saying. And this shows you about love. Remember, the Eldad and Medad in the previous Torah portion prophesies to the nation that Moshe is going to die in the desert. He's not going to go into the land of Israel, and Joshua will take over. So Gad and Reuven said to themselves, how can we enter into the land of Israel without our Rebbe, without our rabbi? He showed us so much love, dedication, self-sacrifice. We're going to allow him to stay in the desert, albeit buried in the desert without anyone nearby. We cannot fathom this concept. So they didn't want Moshe to know and say, oh, you're dying, we want to stay with you. They did it in a roundabout way. They made an excuse. They go, you know what, there's great natural resources here. We have a huge herd, tons of cattle. This is a good place for us to settle for our prosperity and economics, right? They have herd, cattle. So Moshe doesn't know the whole story. So he rebukes them. But then when they explain, he says, okay, very good. So here you see the love of God and Reuven. The Torah is sharing us the story to show you of their tremendous love they had for Moshe. They were willing not to go into the land of Israel with their entire families just because they couldn't fathom the concept that Moshe will be alone in the desert, buried somewhere. Look, think about it. So here also, like, to me, this is my own little insight. This I didn't read anywhere. How you see how a leader impacts his people. A leader can teach people about love and compassion and self-sacrifice. They emulated what Moshe would do. And we know ultimately why did Moshe go into Israel? Not because only he hit the rock and didn't talk to it, but because if his people died out in the desert, he stays in the desert metaphorically and also physically with them. His nation that left Egypt, remember, did not go into Israel because of the sin of the spies, only the women and girls and the Kohanim. Moshe stays with his people. And God and Reuven see that and they want to stay with their Rebbe, their rabbi, their leader. But the commentaries have to say ultimately they were wrong only because God wanted every Jew left to enter into the land of Israel. So though their intentions were honorable and perfect and documented in the Torah as such, the commentaries still comment that they had to know that their mission was to enter into the land of Israel, no matter what. Sometimes it cannot be a personal decision. It has to be the decision of God's, because that's what God wanted for you. Not always is it like, yes, it's altruistic, it's wonderful, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, it's compassionate. But ultimately, their mission was to go into the land of Israel and settle in the land of Israel. So I feel it's important to say that, even though we are showing Gad and Reuven in a tremendously beautiful light. And actually, the Torah writes about it. So if the Torah writes about it, obviously, it's very important for us to know this, right? Very important. So does anybody want to add anything?
So what did they end up doing?
They ended up going into the land of Israel. They ended up going into the land of Israel.
After Moses passed away?
Well, yes, when Moses passes away, Joshua becomes the new leader. And he's the one who brings the Jewish people into the land of Israel, conquering the land. Don't forget, they are fighting as they go. Right before this, they conquered the nations of Sichon and Og, who were giants. Giants, of course, with the help of God. But ultimately, yes, that's what they end up doing.
I think it's a good lesson, even in a simplified form, not to jump to conclusions when you assume something is off, to really kind of sit back and give it a little extra thought, and maybe it's not exactly how it's presented. It's deeper. So.
Yeah, it's exactly. Like, not always what we say is what we mean. You know, like we always say, like we discuss this many times, you meet someone, they lash out at you, and you wonder, what did you do to them? You didn't. It's something else going on in their lives. Or your kid comes home, and they throw their knapsack across the floor, and you go, how was your day at school? And they go, great, Mom. And of course it wasn't great. They wouldn't have thrown the knapsack across the room. You know something is going on. So yes, we don't always say what we mean or mean what we say. You know, like sometimes an interesting thing, like I told my mother I want to bring her something. So she says, no, you're going to come all the way to New York. I said, no, I have other errands to run. I didn't have other errands, but she wouldn't let me come if I didn't say that. So you tell a little white lie just for the benefit of doing what you want to do, you know? Because my mother said, no, you're not coming, you're not bringing it to me. And I go, Ma, I'm coming in. Oh, you're coming in anyway. Yeah. So you have to sometimes a buffer or, you know, hide a little bit to do something good. So now I'd like to share something which when I was studying this, I was blown away. So I don't know, I hope that you'll share my sentiments, who knows? There's a very interesting insight into Torah in general, that there is no yahrzeit mentioned in the Torah. Yahrzeit means day of passing. So Moses passes away, we don't know when. Doesn't say when. Abraham passes away, Sarah passes away, Rebecca, Rachel, Jacob, Isaac, Leah. The Torah never tells us when they pass away. There's no yahrzeits in the Torah. How do we know yahrzeits, which means day of passing? The Talmud, the Gemara, through different analysis of the passages, like what we just discussed many times, through this way, that way, they figure out the yahrzeits of every one of our great sages and Moses and so on. Now, Moses passed away, we all know, the same day he was born, the 7th day of Adar, 120 years later. That's what Haman in the story of Purim says, I'm going to choose the 7th day of Adar to kill the Jewish people because it's an unlucky day. Moses passed away. But what he didn't know, Moses was also born on that day. And that energy transformed the day into a day of a holiday where the Jewish people were rescued and saved from Haman. So again, we do know yahrzeits, but not from the text, not from the literal text, except one person who passed away in 2 Torah portions ago, Chukas. Who remembers who passed away? Anybody? Moses' oldest brother, Aaron, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, the first high priest of the Jewish nation. His yahrzeit is documented in this Torah portion. I want to read it to you. Aaron the priest climbed Har Mountain at God's command, and he died there on the 1st day of the 5th month in the 40th year of the Israelites' exodus from Egypt. When he died on Har HaHar, Aaron was 123 years old.
Wow.
So he passed away Rosh Chodesh of Menachem Av, this month, the 1st day of the month of Av, which is the saddest month on the Jewish calendar. We know the first temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av, right? The 9th day of Av. The second temple was destroyed on the 9th day of Av. And starting from Rosh Chodesh are 9 days of mourning. And last week, we started off the 3 weeks of mourning, which leads to the 9 days of mourning, and then Tisha B'Av, which is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. So Aaron is the only one's yahrzeit documented in the Torah. But makes him more cryptic is when did he die? 2 Torah portions ago, Chukas. So why didn't it say there when he really dies? It should have said Aaron died on the 1st day of the 5th month, which is the month of Av. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av. And the answer is like this, very interesting insight, that a person's energy in their lifetime is what remains when they pass away. A person's yahrzeit is a time when we look at the energy of what that person brought to the world. So in other words, whatever a person brought to the world stays behind when they pass away. Aaron passes away this month, which we are now going to be, next week is going to be the anniversary of Aaron's passing. Aaron was the first high priest of the tabernacle, the mini temple. What gets destroyed in the next 2 weeks? The first Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash. So Aaron's passing is a premonition of the destruction of the temples. in a sense. Not that, God forbid, he caused the temples to be destroyed, but he passes away at the time when we mourn for the first and second Beit HaMikdash and other terrible tragedies that happened in this month and on Tisha B'Av. To illustrate this, I'll tell you a story. That there was a man in a town, a Jewish town, and every time somebody had a loss in the family, what happens when someone sits Shiva? They take off their shoes. You don't wear leather shoes. You sit in your socks. You sit in your slippers. You sit in canvas shoes like on Tisha B'Av. We sit without shoes, right? Or we wear non-leather shoes like Yom Kippur because it's a day of mourning. To show his empathy and compassion for the families, whenever someone would pass away in his town, he would also walk around in his socks without shoes or in his slippers. He was known as the man that whenever someone passed away, he wouldn't wear shoes. He would wear his socks or his slippers. When does he pass away? On Tisha B'Av, a day when everyone has to take off their shoes. So his empathy and his compassion brought an energy. He passes away on Tisha B'Av, and now everyone is mourning, so to say, his death, his passing. His energy created that. A person's energy creates what remains in the world. Another story I want to share with you about this. My grandmother, Luba Alta Taibel, her name was. We called her Taibel. Taibel means a dove. Luba means love. Alta means old. Love, old dove, whatever. She ran away with her 9 children from Stalin, Russia. They forged passports. They were in DP camps. Very difficult. They remained religious Jews until they settled in Brooklyn, New York, where my grandfather had a grocery store. They were Lubavitcher disciples of the Rebbe. Just to illustrate their dedication, when they came to America, it was the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was already in the United States, and they went to see him. They couldn't believe that after years of suffering under communist Russia, they escaped to America. So when they went into the office of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, the family called out, Shechiyanu v'kimanu, you know, the blessing we say on the holiday candles, on the Kiddush, on new items. L'zman hazeh. Thank you for coming, bringing me to this place. And the Freida Rebbe says to them, you're saying Shechiyanu because you see me? I have to say Shechiyanu because to see a family with 9 children escaping Russia, religious Jews, remained religious Jews, I have to say Shechiyanu on such a family. So my grandmother settled in Brooklyn. It's a hard life when you run away from communism and socialism and persecution. And they went into this Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson's office. Families would go in on birthdays, on special occasions, for bar and bat mitzvah. And my grandmother said to the Rebbe, I'm feeling depressed. I'm depressed. The Rebbe said, no, my grandmother loved to dance. She was a magnificent dancer. The Rebbe said to her, you should dance at everyone's wedding. So what did my grandmother take on as a mission in her life? To dance at weddings. Not only family weddings, my grandmother would go to every wedding that came up and dance, get dressed up in a gown, makeup, high-heeled shoes, and dance and dance. Especially weddings of Balei Tshuva. Balei Tshuva were our boys and girls who became religious. They didn't have large families like, you know, we have a wedding, 1,000 people, just a family, you know, hundreds of. They had nobody, and even those that they had were not necessarily religious, didn't know customs, didn't know traditions. And my grandmother would make the wedding. She would dance in the women's section. It was amazing. Everyone knew Baba Lipsker, type of Lipsker would be at a wedding. It was amazing dancing. Anyway, years later, my grandmother's now 94 years old. She's not well anymore. And it's my uncle, her son's youngest son's wedding. And the whole family's there. My grandmother's not well, she's not here. And my mother, who's the oldest of the family, gets a call that the Baba was taken to Methodist Hospital. So she and a few siblings sneak out of the wedding. to go to the hospital. Then I want to alert the groom's parents, because why should they miss their child's wedding? It's the end of the wedding though, and slowly but surely, everyone finds out, and even the groom's parents are all in Methodist hospital. And the nurses, and she's in an ICU, and they're trying to keep her alive. And the nurses and doctors are looking, what's going on? A family in wedding gowns, bow ties, tuxedos surrounding this lady. What do they think? This is a wedding? And not only that, when the doctors say it's almost over, they begin to sing Hasidic melodies, lively Hasidic melodies, wedding songs. And my grandmother passes away to the sounds of her children and grandchildren, over 40 of them singing wedding melodies in their gowns. Wow. And she returned her soul to her maker. She spent her entire life, 40 years, dancing at weddings. What was her energy? What was her last moments of her life? A wedding. People in gowns, people singing songs around her bedside. Our lives create our energy. I asked myself after looking this all over, I said, what is going to be my energy? I better start moving along here. I got to do something. But seriously, what is our energy? What are we going to leave behind from ourselves of what we do in our lives? Because our energies is what will be left behind, what will surround us, and what continues to surround us. You know, my mother now, till 120, dances at every wedding like crazy. She's also a big dancer. I think my girl, I'm not such a, I dance, but I'm not such a good dancer. My girls are great dancers, and they dance a lot, and it's great. But my grandmother's mission was dancing. So now let's go back to Aaron. What else was Aaron known for? Oyev Shalom, Roidev Shalom, Makarvin like Torah. He loved peace, he pursued peace, and he brought people closer. That's why when he passes away, it says all of Israel mourned. When Moshe passes away, it says the children of Israel, the sons of Israel mourned. By Aaron, it says the entire nation mourned. He was known as the peacemaker. He was known to pursue love and give love. And that was his legacy. Now, which brings me to the point, is God, the Kabbalah tells us, Noisein refuah lifnei maka. And you'll see how this all ties in. That God gave the remedy, the solution, before God gives the challenge, the plague, the disease, the destruction. God gives the remedy to it all. That before God created challenges that would happen in our world, God already created the solution to those challenges. They are here. When the first and second destruction of the temple happened, anybody know why? Why was there such a drastic action on behalf of Almighty God? Anybody know? The number one reason God says, I am going to destroy my first and second temple. Not because the Jews worshipped idolatry and betrayed God. That God could tolerate. They betrayed each other. Hatred of sinas chinam, hatred of their brethren. When God saw that the Jewish people were not united, there was strife, there was dissension, there was hate, that's when the first temple was destroyed and then the second temple. God said, that I cannot tolerate amongst my people. You betray me, you don't eat kosher, you don't keep Shabbos, you worship idolatry. I could tolerate that, God says, but you hate each other, that it's all over. God puts people before God's self in a sense. What was Aaron? He's the remedy. The remedy is peace. Making peace, pursuing peace, loving peace, bringing people together. So what we see, why Aaron's yahrzeit is mentioned Now on a deeper level, says the Rebbe, this is the Rebbe saying this, is that his energy was peace and love. This month, we see the destruction of the temples. What is the remedy for destruction? Compassion, love, and unity. So by placing Aaron's yahrzeit here in the month of Av, when we read this Torah portion, because this is when we read it, that's why it's mentioned now, because this is when we read the Torah portion in the month of Av. God is actually saying, I am giving you the remedy to destruction. The energy of Aaron is the energy that now will resolve destruction. And also will bring us back to where we have to be. The antidote to destruction is love, compassion, and unity. It's very hard when you bear a grudge against somebody. When you have hate in your heart, it hurts you more than the other person. The other person may not even know it. You know, it's like the person is a saying, they set fire to themselves, hoping their enemies will catch on fire too. But at the end, you burn. Your enemy may not even know they're burnt. They'll never catch fire. So hate, anger, unhappiness with other people ends up hurting the person who's holding it in. So this is what God is telling us by telling us the yahrzeit of Aaron in this month when he passed away, and reading it now. That's why it's not mentioned 2 parshas ago, because that's not when the month of Av is telling us how to deal with destruction in our lives, with challenges. Aaron is how you deal with it. Compassion, love. That's the energy that Aaron represents. And that's why in a person's yahrzeit, by the way, we give extra tzedakah, we make a kiddush and shul, we celebrate their life, we pray at their graveside. Why? Because we enact a change in that person's soul. The soul is always traveling on their journey. The people left behind, we on earth, can actually bring the soul to higher and higher levels in the spiritual realm. That's the power of a yahrzeit. That's why we do all these things. We push the soul upwards, upwards, upwards. That's why also Yisker. I told someone said to me, why should I come for Yisker to shul? I said, I'll tell you why. Your father and mother are going to be there. And they're going to say, where's my tachterot? Where is she? She couldn't take 1 hour to come and see me. So when we recite Yisker, when we celebrate a yahrzeit, and I say celebrate because we celebrate the person's life, we enact a change in their soul in a positive way. That's how important a yahrzeit is. To be forgotten is terrible. Terrible. So that's what this is teaching us. Another story I read that I thought was fantastic. There was a guy, Rabbi Ashkenazi. He was the Chabad rabbi in Kfar Chabad, Israel. Kfar Chabad is like the Brooklyn, New York, like the Crown Heights of Israel. That's where all the Chabad guys live, if you're not like doing living else, whatever. There's a concentration, okay? Look at it that way. Anyway, Rabbi Ashkenazi and his wife, it was right before Sukkot, when we sit in the little huts, and a young girl came to see him and his wife. She said, I'm pregnant. My parents will find out, they will literally kill me. My father will kill me. He will not tolerate a pregnant daughter out of wedlock. A young daughter. I'm going to abort the baby, and I just wanted to tell you, Rabbi, what I'm doing. So Rabbi and Rebbe Ashkenazi said, no. It's Sukkot. Give us 2 weeks till Simchas Torah, or 10 days, whatever. Yeah, about less than a week. We're going to find a solution. Promise us you won't do anything until we come back to you, Simchat Torah. And she said, okay. So they scrambled. They called all the Chabad rabbis in Europe. That this was the plan they came up with. She would travel to Europe. They would tell the parents she got a job. She would live with a Chabad rabbi in a family in Europe for 9 months. She would give birth, and they would find a Jewish family to adopt the baby. That was the plan they concocted. No one wanted to do it. Right before Simchas Torah, Rabbi Ashkenazi was in Shul in Israel, and there was a French Chabad rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel Gurevich. And he told him the story. He says, I'm going to take her in. And that's what happened. They sent her off to France. She lived with the family. It was very, very difficult. It's a long, whole story. It wasn't so simple. There were complications. There were challenges with her. She gave birth to the baby girl. And they found a French Jewish couple, a religious couple, to adopt the baby. 35 years later, my brother tells me what happened. Not only that, the couple that adopted her sent the mother, the single mother, a ticket every year for her to visit her child. So the child would know her biological mother. 35 years later, this young girl went to Chabad schools, Chabad seminary, married a Chabad boy, a Frenchie, and is now in Montreal. And it's Corona, okay? Rabbi Ashkenazi passes away, and the father has the girl, the baby born out of wedlock, married to this French guy. They're in Canada, and the father of the newborn baby boy is in Shul. No one is in Shul. It's Corona in Canada. But Rabbi Ashkenazi's son is somehow, some way in Shul that morning. And the French guy, they start chatting, and he says, Ashkenazi? You're Rabbi Ashkenazi's son? Okay, my son's bris is tomorrow. I need you to come and be the sandik. Sandik is an honor to hold the baby. Because of your father, my wife is alive and my son is born. And he goes, and who's at the bris? The father of the child, the mother of the child, the baby born out of wedlock, and the new baby boy. And Rabbi Ashkenazi is the sandik holding the baby. So again, look at this energy. Rabbi Ashkenazi, 35 years ago, he saved a child, a Jewish child, and its mother, because who knows what the father would have done to this girl. And how could she live with that, what happened to her? And his son, 35 years later, ends up being in that place to hold the baby during the bris. The energy of our actions, the positive energy, let's talk about positive energy, stays forever. And you never know when it's going to come back and show itself. This is what we see from Aaron's yahrzeit documented in the Torah. He loved peace. He gave peace. And for all generations, we know what is the antidote to destruction and challenges is an influx of peace and compassion and love. So I want to end off the class now with another medrash that hones this home. I just want to share it because I also, when I read it, I said to myself, this is also to me very interesting. So I hope you find it interesting. And then I want to really hear from you. I can't be the only speaker. It's terrible.
But you're so interesting.
This is a very cryptic medrash, but I want to share it because you know me, I love cryptic, mysterious, nutty, crazy. So there's an interesting medrash on the beginning of Genesis about Adam and Eve. Okay? A terrible thing happens. I don't know if you remember in Genesis. Terrible, terrible tragedy. Adam and Chava have two sons, Cain and
Abel.
Cain and Abel. Cain is the older, Abel's the youngest, and who knows what happens?
Cain kills Abel.
Cain kills his younger brother. Why? You're mute, Diane.
Jealousy.
Jealousy. Jealousy, he stabs his brother to death. Adam and Chava they see their dead son lying there. And the Torah says they don't know what to do. What do you mean they don't know what to do? You take your son, you bury him. Didn't God tell them, may offer, you come from earth and you end up in earth? The Medrash says they suddenly see a raven and a raven is digging a hole with its beak and burying another raven. And then they knew to bury their son. This is the Medrash. It's a very cryptic, strange story. What do you mean they didn't know what to do? Till they saw the raven, they didn't know what to do.
Well, what would you do with Cain also?
Very, excellent, Margaret, exactly. So the Torah and Kabbalah is analyzing this. Not they didn't know what to do physically, how to bury their son. They didn't know if they could ever get up and move forward in life. My son died, was killed, and my other son is a murderer. How do parents recover from such tragedy in their lives? That's what the Torah is saying. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to move on in life. How could you move on in life after such a tragedy and destruction? How do you move on? Just to emphasize, one is a murderer and one is dead. And there's nobody else. There are 4 people on earth at this time. How do you move on in your life after such a tragedy, such a destruction? So the Medrash says they saw the raven burying another raven and they figured it out. And we see they had more children and then life went on. How is this what did they see in that raven that gave them the energy, the courage, and the resourcefulness to move on?
Was it their faith?
Very good, faith. Anybody have an insight? What did they see that this gave them the insight to say, we're now going to pick ourselves up and go on in life? Because this insight is really an insight for all of us. That's why I'm bringing up, and then that's how I'm also going to tie it into what we spoke about Aaron. So basically, who knows a raven? Edgar Allan Poe, Nevermore, right? The raven, not only in Jewish life, also in secular culture, is very an ominous bird. There's always a raven on the witch's shoulder, right? The raven, even Arev, the Hebrew word for raven, has in it ra, negativity. It's black. It's a negative animal. In the morning prayers, it's a very interesting thing. It says God will provide this and God will provide that, and God will give us food like the children of the raven. What does that mean? God will feed us like the children of the raven? But the answer is a raven is a cruel animal. Normally, animals defend their children. Bears, go near a bear's cub, it's all over for you. Animal, by instinct, they defend their young. They fight for their young. They kill for their young. A raven, the minute the scientists, you can read about it, Natural Geographic, the minute a baby raven is born, the mother deserts it. It has to fend for itself. The raven is a cruel animal. It doesn't have natural instincts of parenting. That's why the Torah says God will feed those like the children of the raven. Those who have no one, God will feed them. Just like a raven deserts its children, God takes care of those who are deserted. That's the analogy. So, when the Adam and Chava see the raven burying another raven, it's not even a normal circumstance, because no raven will do a favor for another raven. Right? When you do a favor for someone, I'll go shopping for you, and then you go shopping for me. I'll babysit your children, you'll babysit my children. Reciprocity. Everybody does nice things, but you know what? It's reciprocity. She did for me, I'll do for her. So when they saw the raven burying the other raven, and the other raven is dead, the dead raven is not going to say to the raven, oh, you know what, you buried me, I'll bury you. They saw that it's called chesed shel emes. Kindness because of truth, not kindness because of reciprocity. Kindness for no other reason than you all want to be kind. You know the other person will never pay you back. You know the other person is not capable of compassion or whatever. You'll know the other person will never apologize, but you do it because you are compassionate. You do it for no other reason than the act of goodness, compassion, and love. So when Adam and Chava saw a raven burying another raven for no other reason but because it was trying to do something right, they realized what God wanted from them. That the remedy to pain and tragedy and destruction is getting up and exploding the world with kindness, compassion, goodness, and love. That's the only way they could survive. Now, you would have never faulted them and say, oh yeah, Adam and Chava went into a cave and they died of depression. You would never say, oh, they're terrible people. You'd say, you're right, look what they suffered. You couldn't do it, neither could they. But when Adam and Chava saw the raven, they said the only solution to us surviving such a terrible double tragedy is if we pick ourselves up and we fill the world with goodness, kindness, hope, faith, compassion, and love. Aaron, the Aaron approach. Love peace, pursue peace. And that's what they saw. That love without conditions, compassion without conditions, kindness without conditions. Doing something for the sake of the act of goodness, like it says in the Torah, not because of reciprocity. This was Aaron. He pursued peace no matter what. Not, oh yeah, I'll bring you peace, now you bring me peace. Or like Israel, Arab said, we'll give you peace if you give us a piece of land. Peace for peace. And to illustrate, I'm just going to share a story that my brother just told me. A woman who survived the Holocaust, her entire family was wiped out. She lives in Spring Valley. She's 94 years old, 95. She got COVID-19. They rushed her to the hospital and they wanted to put her on a ventilator like everyone else. And she said, absolutely not. She was adamant. She didn't allow it because she worked with Bikur Cholim. Bikur Cholim is visiting the sick. She volunteered with visiting the sick. You know, many Jewish communities have these organizations. They visit the sick, they bring you chicken soup and gefilte fish and cholent in most of the major hospitals. So she saw people on ventilators die. So she was adamant and she survives COVID-19. And she comes home for Pesach, and her granddaughter told my brother the story because he lives in the neighborhood. And Pesach, the day after Pesach, they go into her room to wake her up, and she has passed away peacefully in her sleep. Why am I sharing this story? Because what does her granddaughter say? Her whole entire family was wiped out in the concentration camp. She came to America. What could she have done? She could have sat depressed, mourning, not waking up in the morning saying, what is my life worth? Look what I went through. My whole family is gone. There's nothing for me. She went, she married, she had children, she had grandchildren. She fought for her life. She brought serenity to her life. She made peace in her life. And how did she die? Not on a ventilator. She died in her sleep peacefully. She created her energy, and her life ended with that energy. So it comes full circle. And would you have faulted her? Would you fault any Holocaust survivor? Never would you say, oh, why are they depressed? Of course. Why are they not depressed is a better question. So again, to rehash what we learned from this Torah portion is the energy we create in our lives, is the energy that will follow us till 190 when we pass on, and it will be the energy that we create in our world that others can benefit from. What did Aaron teach us? Refuah lifnei maka. God has given us the antidote, the answers, the vaccines and the remedies to every challenge of this universe. If it's in this universe, there's a remedy in this universe. Any challenge, God already gave us the answer. And what's the answer? I call it, this is my own slogan, the Aaron approach. We have to fill the world, bombard the world with compassion, love, goodness, kindness, hope, faith, empathy. We have to take off our shoes, so to speak, when someone has a pain in their lives, for no other reason than this is the way to bring the world to a better place. So journey forth. Use technology. Don't forget who you are and where you come from. And we're coming now to the saddest days of the Jewish calendar. But God also tells us these days will be turned to days of joys with the coming of Mashiach and the rebuilding of the third Beit HaMikdash. So I think it's either next week or the week after. There's a Thursday will be Tisha B'Av, so we're not going to have a class on Tisha B'Av. But the week right before, we're going to do a class on what Tisha B'Av is. Why are we mourning when this happened so many years ago? I remember fasting, and I say to my mother, why do I have to fast? Because years ago, it was a destruction. So my mother said, because it's not that years ago was there destruction. There's a destruction right now. That's why we're fasting. And we'll talk more about Tisha B'Av. But I think the message is for us, for me, I always talk about myself, is what energy am I putting into this universe every day? That's the question. What are we contributing? And it starts at home. So anybody who have any comments or want to say, add anything?
Yes, Freida, you have to be Joe Biden's running mate. There's no question.
I don't know anything about politics. That's my only problem.
You're a quick learner. You're a quick study.